I don't pretend to care all that much these days about the quote-unquote beautiful game. I'm far too old and grumpy to have my weekends ruined by a bunch of overpaid tarts whose job it is to shepherd an inflated sheep stomach into an outdoor cupboard. However, in my youth, I was known to frequent the terraces once or twice, and every time the national side gets the entire country's hopes up again, only to be dashed into bits as we fail on penalties again, I can't help but feel at least a smidgen of nostalgia. As both the 2024 Copa America and the Euros tournaments culminate this weekend in the old soccer ball, congratulations to amazing England, or commiserations to bloody useless England, delete as appropriate, let's list every single footy game released for the original Game Boy, from worst to best. With 22 titles to get through, one for every player at the start of a match, which is a weird coincidence. We'd better kick off straight away, I reckon. #22. Soccer Mania. I cannot believe I'm talking about this stupid game again. If you remember the review I did on it ages ago, you'll know that there is such an absurd amount wrong with Soccer Mania that it's actually impressive, in a sick, morbid kind of way. Get it the heck off the screen, right now. #21. FIFA International Soccer. Now, objectively, the first entry in the FIFA franchise is arguably actually worse than Soccer Mania because it just so happens to be some of the most broken, unplayable code on the whole system in any genre. The reason it's only second to last is because I'm bitter. Soccer Mania can suck a chode. Anything you think you should be able to do in a football game is not possible here. You're not even able to dribble with the ball, never mind pass it, and it's an atrocious mess of flickering sprites, dream sequence levels of slowdown, and unintelligible controls. There would be 3 more chances for FIFA. I just hope that was enough. #20. J League Supporter Soccer. Japan's top footy league had loads of Game Boy games with the branding plastered all over it, even though I haven't yet talked about any of them on the channel. That's because at the point where we've put the Game Boy series on temporary hiatus, the J League didn't yet exist. This purports itself to be more of a management sim, with the idea that you need to build your Japanese national team from a bunch of current stars, from 1998 at least, and historical legends to take the team through the first World Cup they ever qualified for. The game came out on the same day that Japan lost their 3rd group game to Jamaica in said World Cup, and had already been eliminated unceremoniously from the competition by that point. I don't want to say it was J-Wing's fault or anything, but... #19. World Cup USA 94. As a competition, it's kinda hard for an Englishman to even talk about World Cup 94 because our latest batch of donkeys didn't even manage to qualify for the tournament in the USA. It's most fondly remembered over here for being the one where Diana Ross missed that penalty during the opening ceremony, but the goal still fell apart as though she scored. That sort of sums up this video game in a weird kind of way. Lazy coding with no real thought behind any of it. It's barely even functional as a football experience. Oddly, the game was cancelled in the USA. Even the host nation didn't care all that much. #18. Captain Tsubasa J Zenkoku Seiha e no Chosen. There were 2 Tsubasa titles on Game Boy, one by Bandai and one by Tecmo. One was good, one was awful. Now, Tecmo typically make decent sports games by all accounts. Anything good rarely came out of Bandai's feck houses, especially on Game Boy. Guess which one this is? Based on the anime, this franchise takes a different approach to football, being more spur-of-the-moment decision-based and featuring an element of dice rolling, where the success or failure of your choices is determined by players' stats as well as luck. If you want to play soccer crossed with a tabletop game, this might appeal. Well, not this, per se. Try the other one. This is rubbish. "17. Super Kickoff." It disheartens me to see Dino Dini's cult favourite Kickoff so far down the list. While much tougher and more divisive than some of its contemporaries like Sensible Soccer, the Kickoff franchise has its stalwart fanbase even to this day. Even they'd find it hard to defend the Game Boy port, however. Nearly as hard as you'll find it to defend your own goal. Probably the biggest problem is it's far too zoomed in to see any of your teammates, meaning any notion of build-up play is replaced by pressing a button and hoping one of your players is in that vague direction. Hell, you'll have a hard enough time just trying to work out where on the pitch you are. "16. Goal." You can sort of see the aim with this one. The attempt with Jalico's goal was to create a more realistic football sim, being one of the first to feature yellow and red cards, penalties and so on. And the AI has at least had a little thought put into it. They seem to be semi-intelligent. Unfortunately, as with a lot of these relegation-threatened titles on this list, the controls on your end just aren't any fun to play with, and it just leaves you annoyed that nothing you try to pull off actually works. There'll be goals, for sure, but they won't be for your side. "15. Magnetic Soccer." Okay, so this isn't strictly soccer, even though it's in the title. This is a Game Boy representation of the noble art of table football, or foosball, whatever you want to call it. A European exclusive actually developed by Nintendo themselves seems an odd thing to exist in its own right, even aside from the fact that I can't think who this game is even for. Unfortunately, the game's content pool is about as shallow as you'd imagine it is. There's a very simple way to reliably score without fail, and once you figure that out, the entire challenge is just gone, along with your desire to keep playing. This whole thing feels more like a mini-game you might unlock in an actual footy title. "14. J League winning goal." Before EA Sports and its derivatives started churning out FIFA games each year on the DMG, they had a go at a J League title. This was the second one that developer Graphic Research were involved in, and it's actually a bit of a step down from the King of Ace Strikers. It's at least playable, but not in a satisfying way. A shot at the goal centrally will virtually always be saved, whereas a diagonal one from the edge of the box will nearly always go in. To contrast, your own keeper couldn't save a Word document, never mind a football. Also, only having 7 players per team makes the full-sized pitches feel very empty indeed. "13. J League Fighting Soccer, the King of Ace Strikers." Okay, so perhaps winning goal wasn't that much of a step down. These two games actually got the same score. The two titles play very similarly indeed. The reason this is 13th and the other is 14th is because in the years separating the two, Graphic Research really should have learned some lessons and made some improvements, but they didn't. They changed stuff, sure, but it still wasn't very good. This attempts some new but ultimately redundant mechanics as well, whereby you have to cycle through instructions you give to your player, meaning you might have to press 3 buttons just to get the guy to take a shot. It's even more clunky feeling than it sounds. "12. FIFA Soccer 96. The second FIFA game ranks a good 10 spots higher than the first one, which indicates that lessons were at least learned in this franchise. Hey, you can actually dribble the ball this time, and passing is decent after a fashion. Some streamlining was definitely left to do, however. You can see just what a heavy toll this game puts on the CPU. Still lots of flickering, and the game's frame rate almost grinds to a halt in places, but this was a step in the right direction for sure. Even so, in 1995, I can't imagine many fans would have tolerated this in comparison to the Sega or SNES versions. 11. Matthias Sammer Soccer. Released under 3 different names, this was the 1997 European release, I'm guessing just in Germany. It originally came out in Japan only as J League Big Wave Soccer, and then again in 1998 as Nippon Daihyo Team in time for the World Cup. The sound is the worst thing about the game, with sound effects replaced by this daft little song loop. Gameplay-wise, this is not too shabby. The ball sticks to your own players well enough, and the controls do what they say they do. It's not my first choice, of course. There are 10 titles better than this on the system after all, but we're at least getting somewhere now. "10. Aoki Densetsu Shoot." Not dissimilar to Captain Tsubasa, this anime-based soccer-themed game is another where you need to make split-second decisions to perform the actions. It'll take a little while to get your head around how to position players and stuff, but is quite good fun should you persist with it. The biggest problem with it is the sheer level of randomness. Whether an action is successful or fails seems to be determined with the same level of RNG as a rock-paper-scissors contest would be, and it kinda crushes any skill or tactics you might wish to employ. Still, not a bad effort really. It's not the best of its kind, however. 9. FIFA Road to World Cup 98. Yeah, there are still 2 FIFA games to go, and the fact that they both cracked the top 10 should tell you that soccer games were not really the Game Boy's strongest area. In fact, the ratio of good to bad games is not particularly an impressive one. The fact this was the 3rd World Cup to get the DMG treatment does say something about the longevity of the console. In fact, it's really a toss-up between this one and FIFA 97, which were both very similar games. They're both an improvement on 96, and a colossal step forward from the unplayable first one. "8. FIFA Soccer 97. As good as it was going to get before the consoles improved, FIFA 97 was at least playable. 96 moved us in the right direction in that it did at least work, however it truly overwhelmed the system with its graphical demands. This time the graphics do seem to be stripped back a bit, which definitely works to the game's advantage. We're about as close to a smooth handheld FIFA experience as would get until the Game Boy Advance comes out. Well, FIFA 2000 on Game Boy Color wasn't too bad, but that's not on this list for obvious reasons. 7. J League Live 95. The 3rd J League game chronologically happens to be the best one. Taking place horizontally, it still works pretty well. Dribbling is automatic, simply and effectively carried out. Tackling is functional, and passing and shooting is accurate. Literally nothing flashy about this game at all, but I'm grateful that at least one of them was actually good. Offside was even programmed in, but they seemingly didn't tell the AI teams, who seem to get caught out by it all the time. Probably the first game on this whole list that I'd actually recommend to someone. 6. Football International. Yeah, we're into the better stuff now. There are 8 teams to choose from here, and you need to work your way Mortal Kombat style through the whole lot to win the World Cup. The game targets the nearest teammate in the direction you aim, marking one of the better passing systems of any football game in the library. You can even crack off some trick shots like bicycle kicks if you can get into position and then pull off the button combos. Really fun. Five. International Superstar Soccer. I remember a time in the late 90s when ISS had all the hype. It was before Pro Evo came onto the scene, but for a minute there, a not insignificant demographic really believed this franchise would replace FIFA. Of course, it didn't, but when even the Game Boy game is thoroughly playable, perhaps it wasn't as dumb as it sounded. Konami were in charge of it, which might explain matters. They managed to craft a really strong balance between decent graphics and playability, something which EA Sports and their derivatives never managed on the Game Boy. Even the sound design is really good here, probably the best from any footy game, with subtle little clunks when dribbling and a hefty kicking sound. The crowd roar is dynamic too, getting louder as you approach goal. Some really clever stuff here, and while it's not objectively the highest scoring, it's probably my favourite entry. Four. Captain Tsubasa vs. Look, these tactical, real-time interpretations of football are either going to be your thing or they're not. Sure, they're definitely more popular in Japan than anywhere else, but if you're a fan of the sport or video games they're on, I would definitely give Tsubasa vs. a bash at least once. It's very involved and there's certainly a learning hump to get over, but this is really good fun for how unique it is. It might play more like a strategy game than a sports one, but still, graphically as well, it's wonderful, and there's even a story mode. Three. Elite Soccer. Probably the most accomplished game in the genre in terms of mechanics. Skill levels aren't just ranked by the teams, but the individual stats of each player, which was a brand new concept. Players with a higher speed stat actually run faster, more accurate players are easier to score with. Set pieces like corners and throw-ins are actually useful rather than just a hit and hope thing. More fundamentally, the control you have over passing, shooting and tackling is totally natural feeling. Yeah, Elite Soccer, or just Soccer as it was called in Europe, is proper good. If ISS isn't my favourite, it's this one. 1A and 1B, I'd say. Two. Sensible Soccer European Champions. To get Sensible Soccer feeling this close to the Amiga version on a Game Boy is remarkable. Action is fast-paced, you have the same control over the ball as you'd expect if you've played this before, it's as captivating on Game Boy as it ever was. Top-notch footy fun here and loads of teams to pick from. The sound is kinda garbage, but as the least important metric, I'm not docking it places because of that. This is marvelous, folks. 1. Nintendo World Cup. For how early in the library this is, it gets so much credit. Technos' port from the NES version of the same name might not have much in the way of realism, but for humor, charm, and just damn good gameplay, you can't really beat this one. So much fun whether playing 1 or 2 player, a perfectly measured difficulty curve, and some of the funniest sprite work on the whole system. This game wins the lot because it's not just for soccer fans. Literally anyone could get enjoyment out of this, which you arguably can't say about anything else on the list.